أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Subhanallah, what a beautiful community. Thank you to Dr. Zakir and to أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Subhanallah, what a beautiful community. Thank you to Dr. Zakir and to the Imam and the Qari who invited me today. It's absolutely an honor being here with you, despite the long drive from South Jersey to Long Island, but I am happy that I was able to join you because from the very minute that I entered into this space, I got to meet some incredible people that I truly believe are like sisters now, alhamdulillah. The warmth of the community, the connections of the community, the feeling that everyone is here for a purpose, and that purpose is to please Allah in gathering to connect and support a cause that inshallah will continue to help generation after generation. When I first received the email, the invite from Dr. Zakir, I looked up the name of the Masjid, Shelter Rock, and the first thought that came to mind was what an apt and fitting name for a masjid. Shelter. A space where people can feel safe. A space for reflection. A space for connection. You know, just a few days ago, we returned from our Cornerstone Umrah. And one of the most pivotal experiences that our group had during this trip was climbing up the 1,748 stone steps on Jabal Noor to arrive at Ghar Hira, a small space that can barely fit one or two people. The space in which the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sought shelter, sought a place to reflect, sought a place to find a sense of self, a sense of spirituality, a sense of connection to Allah. And it took me back to our understanding of the verses of Surah Al-Kahf that we read from Thursday to Thursday, a reminder of the three youth that in their journey to escape from fitna, in their journey to escape from the harshness of the world, the fasad that they were exposed to, they found their own shelter in a cave in which they found a space to be safe, to reflect, to connect with Allah. And it took me back to another visit that we made on our Umrah trip, which was to Ghar Thawr. And we all know the incredible miracles that occurred in the cave of Thawr. When the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu hid in that cave from the kuffar, when they hid in that cave during the hijrah, during the migration, and who was it that came to this space of shelter to assist them? Who was it that helped in this process of them seeking shelter? It was the young. It was Ali radiallahu anhu, the youngest individual to accept Islam at age 10. Ali radiallahu anhu, who slept in the bed of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as a young man to protect the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu as they sought shelter in Ghar Thawr. And it was Asma bint Abu Bakr, a young woman, who received the nickname of the one of two belts, because she would visit Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam despite the difficulty, despite the potential for her to be harmed, despite the journey and the perilous path. And we tried to climb up the mountain to reach Ghar Thawr, and we saw how difficult it was. And to imagine Asma bint Abi Bakr, a young woman, climbing up and ripping her belt in two in order to send provisions and sustenance to the beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and her father, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Because these were the youth around the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that were inspired. Youth that were inspired, yes, like the youth of Surah Kahf who found shelter in the cave. The youth around the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the companions that took every step of the way, an opportunity to stand, to believe in a cause, to speak out against injustice. And today, as I sat here in the audience and I listened to young Aisha reciting her poem, really reliving the essence of our oral history, the essence of our deen, the beauty of poetry, and utilizing oral history to be able to express a sentiment. And I saw in Aisha, I saw what we look for in our youth today, a reflection of the youth that surrounded the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who stood up for the cause of justice, who stood up against the darkness, who stood up in order to speak the truth. And our youth can only do this when we provide them with that shelter, with that safe space that will nourish them, that will nurture them, that will guide them, and that will give them a reason to believe, a reason to stand up for their beliefs, even when it may put them in harm's way, even when it may bring to them great personal danger. And today, more than ever, we are so proud of our Muslim American youth. Our Muslim American youth who see injustice happening in Gaza, who see darkness, who see lies, who see propaganda, and who stand up against it and speak out. In every protest that we have been to, in every march, in every rally, who is leading the front lines, speaking out against injustice? It is our youth. It is your youth. It is the youth who have found that cocoon in our masajid, who have found that safe space, who were given the tools, the understanding of the Quran, the understanding of the seerah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to be proud bearers of our deen, not just in words but in action. And so when we look to what is happening today, when we look to what is happening today to our brothers and sisters in Gaza, when our hearts break to see the father or the grandfather carrying his child and crying out that this is ruh al-ruh, the soul of my soul, when we see children, young men, young women, their lives lost, we must know that their lives are not lost. That their lives are not lost because in their sacrifice, in their death, they are sparking in our youth, they are sparking in our hearts an awakening and understanding that resilience, true resilience that is rooted in the love of Allah, true resilience that is rooted in following in the footsteps of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will never be lost. Will never be lost because it is what carries us. And it is what will inspire us and will continue to allow us and our youth to be on the front lines, speaking out against injustice, trying to change oppression with their hands, with their tongues, with their hearts in any way that they can. And it's important that for us, as the elders in the community, for us, the generation that maybe is not necessarily Generation X or Generation Z or millennials, maybe we're the baby boomers, but it's important that we take those steps to continue to provide those sheltering spaces for our children and for our youth. It's important that we're able to bring them to spaces in which they feel the light of Allah, the light of our deen. You know, when we turn to the Quran, we see that Allah Azza wa Jal reminds us in Surah Al-Baqarah, and again in Surah Al-Ma'idah, and in several places in the Quran. He reminds us that He is the one that brings us from darkness into light. يَخْرُجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. But the word darkness in English doesn't do justice to the term in the Quran, al-dhulumat. Because it's not one dhulam, it's not one darkness, a singular, as the English word captures, but it's multiple darknesses, dhulumat. And when we think of those multiple darknesses, we begin to understand that this is our dunya. Our dunya is a world in which there is dhulm, oppression, a type of darkness that suffocates. Our dunya is a world in which there is ourselves who commit infractions against the pleasure of Allah. And that in itself, when we repeat the dua, Subhanaka inni kuntu min al-dhalimeen, Subhanaka inni dhalamtu nafsi, there is a dhalm or a dhulm that exists in the actions that we take that are displeasing to Allah. And there is a darkness that exists in terms of the absence of light. But the absence of light only occurs when Allah is far from our hearts. And when we turn to Surah An-Nur, the chapter of light in the Quran, we see Allah Azza wa Jal reminding us through a parable that His light is the light that we must seek. That He is nuran ala nur, light upon light. And His light is described as the parable of being in a niche. And in that niche there is a lamp that has clear glass. And within that lantern of clear glass there is a wick that is soaked with oil. An oil that we can envision similar to the purity of the olive oil that Aisha spoke to us about in her poem. But this wick is dampened with an oil that glows without a flame even brought near to it. This is the light of Allah. Now imagine if we as a community continue to provide that niche, to provide that shelter, to provide that space for our youth, so that their hearts become that lantern, so their hearts carry that clarity, and from within the clarity of their hearts, there emanates that light. And that light is the nur of Allah, the nur of our deen, the nur that will, insha'Allah, wipe out the dhulumat in all its forms. And I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal allows us to be those beacons who help guide our youth. I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal allows us to continue to provide the spaces like Shelter Rock that can be the safe space, those areas where our youth can flourish and grow and learn and become that next generation that stands against oppression and not just leads in rallies, not just leads in protests, but leads in all that is good and eventually puts out that darkness, puts out that dhulumat with the nur of Allah. Jazakum Allahu khair. Assalamu alaikum.